Her marriage, investments, and access, combined with extremely fortunate timing, have created a lot of suspicions.
Nancy Pelosi is a congresswoman from the state of California. She's been working in Congress as a congresswoman for 34 years. And over the last 3 years, since 2018, people have been asking a lot of questions because when you look at the growth of her net worth, it's simply interesting because back in 2018, it was sitting around $100 million. And in 2019, it grew all the way up to $270 million. When it's sitting right now, currently in 2021, around $320 million. Now the thing is, how is that even possible for a congresswoman, even someone working in Congress, making the low six figure? Well, the secret answer may lie into her husband, Paul, because the guy created an investment venture capital firm, both investing into stocks or company through the stock market and also investing into the real estate space. Questions have been raised because when you tend to look at the different investments they made all over the years, especially since she started acting as a congresswoman, there is a lot of issues, there's a lot of questions around conflict of interest, because I'm going to give you some examples where even back then it was already kind of borderline with what we call insider trading. So what happened? Let's go back first to when they actually got married, because things started when Paul, the husband, through his network and connections, introduced her wife to people in high places that are gonna help her make her way through Congress. That was back in 1987. And she's actually grown up the ladder up to the way to now she is the Speaker of the House. It means she pretty much decides what will pass or what will not pass on Congress because she's the Speaker, if you see what I mean. So she has power, influence, and authority. Now, the interesting thing is, when you look at both the investments they made on the stock market and you look at the investments they made on the real estate space, they tend to perfectly time the market, meaning they actually buy when it's the right time and they actually sell when it's the right time. And anything so far that they have bought, minimum at least double in value. Again, it doesn't depend if it's in the stock market or if it is the real estate market. So give you a couple of examples here. When Visa, you know what Visa is, right? Swap your Visa card, right? When Visa in 2007 was preparing to go public through IPO in the market, recently before, she met with the actual CEO of the company, right? And after the meeting, she started making donations. I mean, they started making donations because, you know, how it works in Washington with politics. Now, 2007, things were way different than now when individual people or individual investors were allowed to invest pre-IPO, meaning before the company actually went public. So Visa had an $18 billion IPO before going to the market. Guess what? A couple of days before the actual IPO, the husband, Paul Pelosi, get a phone call from his broker. Hey, you hit the jackpot. You have been invited by Visa to actually purchase your shares. Now keep in mind, this means they are actually given the opportunity to invest ahead of time when other people will actually have to wait 2 days after, 1 day or two after the actual IPO. So they are gaining a competitive advantage here, if you see what I mean. Bear with me. They invested between $1 to $5 million in that investment. Now the really interesting thing is, usually when a public company as big as Visa go public, the very first day it can easily double in value. So you're already talking about $10 million make like that on the spot. All right. Now, interestingly enough, a couple of years after that event, Nancy Pelosi was asked by a fellow congressman if she didn't think that was a conflict of interest.
I wanted to ask you why you and your husband back in March of 2008 accepted and participated in a very large IPO deal from Visa.
A false premise, but it's not true.
All of the bills that were supposedly to be passed but had the ability to hurt Visa's business or Visa's stock price, they were pretty much blocked. They were pretty much blocked. Guess who? By who? Well, you know who. So that lies into what we call conflict of interest, because you cannot pretty much be totally transparent without having to guess how your investments into the company to which you're actually voting a law against, if you see what I mean. So that's what we call conflict of interest. Now, this is not the only time these kind of issues raised with the investments from the Pelosis, because when Microsoft was to be given a $20 billion contract in order to equip the US Army with high-tech headsets, a couple of days prior to the news getting out, the Pelosis invested multiple millions of dollars into Microsoft stock price. After the news was disclosed, the stock price gained huge in value. But a couple of months ago, when President Biden decided to have a crackdown law that would pretty much disrupt the whole tech industry, I mean, the shares were supposed to go down. Guess what? They sold worth of $5 million options on Google parent stock, which is Alphabet. Again, they tend to always buy stocks whenever it's the right time or right before there is an event or a big news that was going to move the share price of the stock in one way higher or another. So when it's on the downtrend, they tend to sell in order to cash out before the actual stock crashes. So the next example I'm going to give you is actually in the real estate market, because one of the commercial buildings that Paul Pelosi owns in San Francisco is actually sitting on a busy street. But a couple of years ago, there was a law that was filed or signed, if you will, or passed in San Francisco, allowing the railroad to pass on the very same street 2 blocks away from the commercial building owned by Paul Pelosi.
If your building is within 2 blocks of a subway or railway stop, it effectively doubles the value of it. And that's precisely what happened to the Pelosi's real estate.
Well, guess who was sitting in the committee of that law actually getting passed? The wife. So this is a pattern of several events where you actually see a trend of the Pelosi's getting some type of information, right? Some types of tip, for example, or some type of, they get to have what we call insider information, which is an information you and I, if you were to make the same investments or to receive the same news, would have made significant value into our investments. But since we are not as privileged as they are, it's a double measure, right? Now, this raises a lot of questions, because a couple of weeks ago, there was actually a similar issue going on with Fed officials, right? The Boston president and the Dallas president Fed regional bankers were actually also caught up into this insider trading, because they traded stocks, which is actually kind of borderline based on the guideline of the Fed, but they traded stocks based on an information on what the chairman, Jerome Powell, was actually going to disclose the next day or the next week, especially seeing the turmoil we had in 2020. So the whole issue here is about market fairness, market transparency, and insider trading, because insider trading is actually a felony, not only on the criminal side of things, but also on the legal side of things. So people go to jail for having investments based on insider trading. But how come when it comes to politicians, people in high places, people in Washington, they tend to be a double measure? Because guess what, guys? You and I, as soon as we hit an overdraft of $20 or even $10, we get a letter the very next day charged by us and sent by the bank reminding us that, hey guys, you need to do something here, okay? If you lie on your tax return, if you lie on your file taxes and it ends up that you're getting more money, the IRS is going to let that go away that easily. Okay, you're risking to go to jail just because of that. But how come when it comes to people in high places, people with big pockets, there's a tendency to actually be that double measure? This is actually what is wrong with the stock market today, at least it's my opinion, because if markets are supposed to be fair and transparent and give everybody, including the little guy, the average Joe on the street, the same opportunity, then I think America will be a greater place than it is today. So the lesson to be learned here, guys, is if you want to trade stocks or if you want to invest your money into the market, because right now, given the current state of our economy, not only here in the US but around the world, you cannot afford not to have your money sitting in the bank. So the stock market or maybe real estate is definitely a way to make your money work for you. But I will start with index funds first, or maybe mutual funds, because you have to pick the right one according to your age, your personal household, financial household, social household, etc., etc. So I wouldn't really go with stocks because those are a little bit more complex. But to end this video, guys, let me know in the comment section what you think about this whole situation with the Pelosis.